If there was one thing that you could do in being a great agent to really master negotiation, it would be to make sure that there are no more solo offers. And what I mean by this is that let's say, for example, that you've got a property that's on the market and you've been working for a little while to try to see whether or not you could get an offer on the property. And after a little bit of time on the market, you finally got that offer and you want to go and present forward that offer. And let's say, for example, that the owner has an expectation of $1 million and you've got an offer at maybe $955,000. And you know that from all of the buyer interest that the $955 is really the money. And you want to go and take that forward to the owner. As you go and present for the $955, what we know is that the owner is going to say, well, where are the other buyers and what are they performing at? And you know what, we'll get someone else who'll pay more, because they actually don't know where the next buyer's at. Now let's say, for example, that you changed your philosophy and you've now got your offer at $955 and you know that there is potentially another buyer, but this buyer is much weaker. And maybe, for example, they're all the way back at $875,000. What I would recommend is that you also get the offer at $875 for when you take forward the offer at the $955. So then that way, when you're working with the client, you can actually say to them, well, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, we're in a position today that we've received two offers. Now, the first offer that we've received on the property with buyer A is at $875,000. The second offer that we've received from buyer B is at $955,000. Now, the reason why this is such a critical component is that what you're actually showing them is that this particular buyer is prepared to pay more than that particular buyer by a significant premium. So when we say that we're out there to get the very best price, the most the market will pay, you can actually show and demonstrate, because it's no longer a solo offer, that there is another offer there which actually clearly shows that that particular offer is clearly out in front. Now, this is a really interesting conversation, because as we start in this negotiation, one of the challenges is that people get locked. Recently, we were negotiating on a deal on behalf of a client in Hawthorne in Melbourne. And it was very interesting because the owner was actually locked at $2.8 million as being the price point that they would actually sell for. Now, interesting enough, we had a buyer at $2,750,000. Now, the agent had tried as much as possible to try to negotiate that particular transaction, but there was $50,000 off. And ultimately, what the owner was saying, you know what, we're going to remove our property from the market. Take out the signboard, take it down from the internet. Thanks so much for your energy and efforts of the auction campaign and all the above. But if we don't get $2.8 million, we won't be selling. So what they do is that they go to remove the property from market, and this is the point where I come into the transaction. So I'm talking with the agent. I said, okay, great, you've got a buyer at $2.75 million. Where's the next buyer? To which he says to me, Josh, there isn't another buyer. I said, well, there must be another buyer. He said, no, there isn't another buyer. I said, okay, so what you're telling me is that out of all the buyers that you know, there's no one else that would actually perform to buy the property at, say, even $2.5 million. And he says to me, well, Josh, there's obviously a buyer who'll pay $2.5 million, but my owners wouldn't accept that, so why would I even entertain it? I said, okay, great. Now that you are locked in the negotiation and you're sitting here at 2.75 and you've got an owner at 2.8, I need you to go and get that offer at 2.5 from that particular buyer. So we went over, we got it on a contract, we got everything organized, and then we went to go and see the owner. We said, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, we've got some new information today because we've now got an additional offer on the property. And we went through all of the terms, the name that's going to be buying the property, the solicitor, the deposit, the conditions of the transaction combined with the settlement date. Because when you get people moving into logistics, you start to get them excited to be thinking that maybe things are actually going to start to happen. And then we presented the offer at 2.5. Now, it was at this point that you would nearly think that the agent would be thrown out of the home. But ultimately, what the owner said is that why would I accept an offer of 2.5 when I've already got an offer of 2.75? At which point the agent says, exactly. But Mr. and Mrs. Owner, we need to understand that this particular buyer that we've got today is prepared to pay substantially more than where the next buyer's at, which is actually a $250,000 premium in this particular case. We ended up being able to go back to the buyer at the 2.75, negotiated an additional $20,000, and we closed out the deal. Now, this was a property that was going to be withdrawn from market, where we clearly had a standout buyer, but because the offer had only been presented in its isolation, the owner didn't know that it was actually the very best offer. So when we took forward an offer at the 2.5, we clearly now show that the 2.75 is actually the standout money. So as a great agent, what you need to learn is new negotiation tactics. And one of those is making sure that there's no more solo offers. I really hope you've enjoyed our coaching tip this week, and we look forward to seeing you next time.